Welcome to Getting Started with Scrivener, Part 3, Customizing Your Scrivener Project and Saving It as a Personal Template. I'm Vanessa Keir. In the previous section, I showed you how to set up your Scrivener project using the preset templates that come with Scrivener. But if you have a specific format that you like, that has customizations in it, it's possible to save that as a personal template so that you can use that as the basis for future projects. So let me show you how. Okay, so here we are in Scrivener. And before I get started on talking about what types of customizations you might want to save in a project template, let me just go over briefly a couple different ways that Scrivener handles customizations. So there are customizations that apply to all Scrivener files that you create, all Scrivener projects. For example, if you add or subtract icons to the toolbar, that's a Scrivener-wide customization. So it doesn't matter what project you're in, you're always going to see the same toolbar. If you want to know what are some other Scrivener-wide customizations, if you're on a Mac, you would go up to Scrivener Preferences, and if you're on a Windows machine, you would go to Tools and then Options, and the window will look a little bit different on the Windows version, and it may look even slightly different on Scrivener 2 for the Mac, because this is Scrivener 3, but generally any of these tabs here are going to be Scrivener-wide customizations. If you look over in my notes area, it's colored and it's lined. That's something I set up over here as well. So again, Scrivener Preferences or Tools Options on the Windows machine will give you an idea of what types of Scrivener-wide customizations are possible, and those are things you don't need to save in a project template. So what kind of things do you want to consider when you're thinking of customizing your own project template? Well, if you watched any of the videos on using Scrivener's project templates, you'll remember that what set the different templates apart was usually how the binder was arranged and what documents were included. So think about what type of project you want to create, and then is this the type of project that you're going to be creating multiple versions of in the future? Because if you're not going to need the same foundation every single time you start a new Scrivener project, then you don't really need to create a project template. The purpose of a project template is just to save you time so that you don't have to go through and add all these folders and documents and assign labels and make sure the label colors are showing and then assign the custom icons, etc. So before you start, you should sit down and think about what is the foundation of the type of project you're creating. So this project has been set up as a 3-act structure fiction project. So I have my acts as big folders with chapter folders underneath those, and each chapter folder has 3 scenes, and then I've named a couple of key points. In the structure here, I have my climax scene, and then I have my inciting incident. Now, I said that the color and the lines of these notes over here on the right are a Scrivener-wide change, but what you type in there is project specific. In fact, this is actually document specific, because if I go down to the scene, it has a different set of notes. So if we go up to the inciting incident, so you could write yourself a little note here as to the purpose of this scene, so that when you're starting a new book, you're reminded as to some of the basic structure you're trying to follow. Again, tailor this to your writing process, whatever works best for you. Then you can include as many different folders in here. So I have an ideas folder, an outline, a style guide, anything that you would typically be creating for a new project in Scrivener, go ahead, set it up in the binder for your project template. But think generic. If you're writing blog posts, maybe you have a new Scrivener project for every website you do blog posts for, and one of the things you have to include in your binder is a style guide and maybe word count restrictions. Maybe you create a document every time that tracks how your submissions are, whether they were accepted or rejected, or whether they're edits. Maybe you track your edits in a status, which I'll talk about in a moment. And if you watched the nonfiction video, you saw that one of the examples I went over was the APA paper, which had this document with specific format for references. So if you are submitting multiple projects to the same journal or the same, university department, and each project has the same formatting requirements for references or footnotes or anything, you could put in some dummy text to show exactly how the reference needs to be formatted. Anytime you're doing inline font changes where you're going from regular text to italics and back, that needs to be done here in the actual document window. That's not something that can be handled during compile. Compile, if you end up applying something like an italic, is going to apply to all text. So if you were to try to take this document and during compile, say for reference, your references, you want it to be italicized, then this plain text here would also end up being italicized. Or maybe they've given you an example paper or a PDF of the guidelines, and you could just pop that into your research folder in your binder. Since I'm in this specific template that has documents that deal with formatting, let me just talk briefly about the types of formatting for this editor window. There are two places where you can change the text as you're seeing it as you're typing. So as I said before, if you're doing like an inline change, you can just use this bar up here to do bold, italic, whatever. You can apply styles and font sizes and spacing. You can also go up and do that in your Scrivener Preferences, or again on Windows, it's your Tools options. And there's this editing option. Again, the menu might be slightly different depending which version of Scrivener you're using. But what this does is this allows you to set the base text formatting that Scrivener uses every time it creates a new document. Again, all your standard font options, the family, centering, spacing, etc. But what you need to bear in mind is that both of these options are just changing the text as you're typing it. They're not actually necessarily affecting what it looks like as it leaves Scrivener. So one of the big advantages to having a compile feature is that, let's say you've got bad eyesight, and as you can see down here in the lower left, I have a 200% zoom on this window. Well, maybe you need something more than that. So you could set your font size to as big as you need it to be in this editor window. You could set the font to a font that's easier on your eyes. You could even change the color if black is hard for you to read and you want something softer. And then during compile, you can tell it to override all of that and export it in whatever industry standard you're going towards. So maybe Times New Roman 12, and then it's a black color for the text. What you want to keep in mind when you're deciding whether or not you need to make a formatting change inside a document in the editor window or whether you can handle it during compile is that compile is going to basically apply to the entire document. So again, like I said before, inline italics like this, you would handle here in the editor window. If you're going to center something, just a line of text, again, you would handle that here in the editor window. I'm not going to talk about how Scrivener handles styles in compile because that's specific to Scrivener 3, but basically just think that if the change you're making is just going to be for one segment of your document, then you want to do it here in the editor window. But if it's something like the font face you're going to want to apply to the entire document, then you can do that during compile. And if you have a document where you need to change from Times New Roman and then you're using another font to show that somebody's sending a text message, there are ways to handle that, but that's beyond the scope of this video. But in general, like I said, anything that's going to just affect a small portion of your text within the document, you do it here in the editor window. Anything that's going to apply to the entire document, you can handle during compile. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking about what documents you're saving in your project template, that you don't necessarily need to be finessing the big level font issues. And then something else you need to be aware of is that because of the compile feature, this is not a print view that you're seeing. So you're not going to see here in the editor window your header, your page numbers, your footer. All that happens during compile. But if you have a document where you know that you're going to want Scrivener to keep to a specific formatting just for that document, you can tell Scrivener during compile, keep the exact formatting that I have in this editor window. In a case like this, where you've got your indent on the second line, maybe that's something that you'd want to set up. So one of the ways you can do your indents is to show your ruler. And this is Scrivener 3, so I'm going to go up to my view icon and do show ruler. And if you're in Scrivener 2 and the Windows version, then go up to your format menu and look for the show or hide ruler option. And then you can go ahead and just, as if you were in a normal word processor, drag your indents and your tabs around. So let's go back over to our other project. As you can see, I have assigned labels to the items in my binder, and the labels, and this is Scrivener 3, so they're down here on the right bottom. You can see here are my labels. If you're in Scrivener 2, or if you're on Windows version before Scrivener 3 for Windows is out, then you're going to have your labels somewhere up in the middle of your inspector. But labels are something that are project specific, so you want to go ahead and create any labels that you know you always want to assign to documents. So some of the ones here, we have hero, heroine, villain, or maybe you want to track things more like this is a dialogue heavy scene. Or if you're a blogger, maybe you want labels by topic. So your green one is on the environment, and maybe your purple one is on relationships. So you could just look in your binder and automatically see which documents fit into that category. You could also, as I mentioned, set up a status. These statuses are all basically revision stages, but you could create a status for anything that you wanted to track. So maybe you want to track your submission status instead, and you want to know whether or not something has the status of being submitted, it's waiting for approval, it's, been returned with edits, whatever. You can only assign one label and one status per item in your binder. So again, think what the similarities are going to be for any project created from that template, then decide from there if you need to create custom labels and custom statuses. Labels, as you can see here in the binder, you can show their colors in the binder, so it's a nice visual shortcut. To do that, you go up to View, use label color in, and then you have a choice here. And I have icons ticked and I have index cards ticked. I could also do binder. This is Scrivener 3, so binder just puts a big dot next to it. In Scrivener 2 and Scrivener for Windows, you're going to get the background to this row changing color, and that's what this option here is for. And you'll notice that if the item is highlighted, you still see the colored circle, but if you move off it, then it just goes to that row being highlighted. This is what happens when you have the index card set to display the label color. And then if I go down to my status and I say this is first draft, I could also do view corkboard options, show status stamps. And this is where you would see your status easily for all the items, let's say in a chapter. This is a great way to get a big picture look at your documents and where they stand in regards to either your revision timeline or your submission timeline, whatever you're using your statuses for. So again, labels, statuses, they're both project specific, and also whether or not you're showing these status stamps and whether or not you're showing your label color in various places. You also want to set those up in your project template because those are project specific. And in case you're just wondering how to add or change the existing labels or statuses, you just go down, or again, to the middle, wherever they're located, and go to the edit, and then you can type over any of the existing names or add new ones. Scrivener comes with preset set of icons that are Scrivener-wide. If you upload custom icons, you have a choice whether or not you're going to save them Scrivener-wide or just to a specific project. So if you are going to upload custom icons that are just for a certain type of project, you would want to save those as your project template. So once you have decided on the items that you want in your binder, oh, and one more thing, you can rename this top level folder whatever you want. So you could call it Fred if you wanted to. And if you remember, again, from my videos on the various templates, that changed, it starts off as draft in the blank template. Here it's a manuscript in the Screenplay. I believe they called it a script, poem, whatever you want to call it. All right, so your project is just the way you want it. Let's go ahead and save it as a custom template. So we'll go up to File, Save as Template, and then you get this window. So I'm going to call it My Awesome Novel Template. Maybe I'll put a year on it. The default category to save it into is fiction, and this category coincides to those categories on the project template chooser window. Again, if you saw the previous videos on project templates, you'll remember that there was a list of categories Scrivener had set up in the left-hand column, and that's where these categories are coming from here. So the manuscript book icon is the default for fiction, but you could choose any of these. You could do something that has a mask, and that gives you the little drama mask. Let's say that you don't want to put this into a regular category. Maybe you want to create your own custom category. You'll see down here that you can do that. And then you can type in a custom category name. I'm just going to leave this as fiction. And then I didn't talk about this, but if you have set up Scrivener 3 styles for some of the documents in your binder, you need to make sure that you tick this box to make sure that the styles are saved into the template. But talking about styles was beyond the scope of this video. So now we have our basic details here, and then we'll go ahead and hit OK. And now the next time I want to go and create a new project, and I go down to fiction, Here is my awesome novel template. And then I could just choose it, give the new project a name, and then I'm all set. Once you create a project from that template, obviously that project is a standalone. So any changes you make to that project individually are specific to that project. If you want to make changes to your template, come in here, create a new project based on your template, make the changes you want, and then save that as a template again using the exact same name. So it overwrites the old template. So that concludes my video on how to save customizations in your own personal project template. I hope you found it helpful. Until the next video, happy writing. Bye.